Welcome to another episode of What Does the Law Say? Before we move on, please like, share, subscribe, and drop your comments in the comment section. Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Akiode, we know that the Labour Act doesn't apply to some set of workers, or it applies to workers rather, it doesn't apply to some set of employees. But the Labour Act provides that if there is going to be termination of contract, notice has to be given. Yeah. Do employers adhere to this notice? Because, I mean, we see people say that my boss just came in one day, I did something, and then he fired me, and that was it. And then, they have to be begging, and so much other things that go around it. Do employers adhere to this issuing of notice of termination, or issuing notice to the termination of a contract?
So I'll say yes. Okay. For organizations that we work for, they usually give that notice period.
Because those are big organizations.
It depends. It depends on how you make the categorization. Okay. We've had cases of working with SMEs because in part of the things we do for them is putting the structures in place in terms of their HR structure to be sure that they follow the rules and they don't open themselves to unnecessary litigation. Yeah. Because there are some litigations that are unnecessary. There are things that you can actually avoid. As simple as the only time an employer can terminate your employment. So I think I need to clarify. There's termination of employment and there is dismissal.
Yes, okay.
So termination of employment by virtue of recent rulings in the industrial court, there must be a reason for termination. Yes. And if it's performance driven, there must be an evidence. Okay. That must be given notice period. Okay. For dismissal are situations whereby there is a breach of a code of conduct or code of ethics that have been outlined as we call major grievances or misconduct. We call some major misconduct. Take, for example, fraud. An employee commits fraud. By virtue of the employment, the employee handbook, it has been stated when you do X, Y, and Z, we're going to dismiss you. In situations like that, the employer would have stated you'll be dismissed without notice and without benefits. So in situations like that, we need to be able to establish, is it termination or a dismissal? What is the essence of what it is? So if you say it is termination, there must be proof to show it is termination. If you say it is dismissal, there must have been a disciplinary procedure in-house showing that this was your offense. We set up a panel in-house. This is the outcome of the panel, and show all of that proof if it's a dismissal. If both is missing, then the employee can actually litigate and say, sorry, it's unjust. You didn't tell me it was performance driven. If you say it was performance driven, there's no evidence to show that it's performance driven. You were not even doing a performance appraisal for you. There were no performance management system.
So how would you even say that?
Performance driven? If you say it's dismissal, you said I stole X amount. What's the evidence? What's the documentation? Who sat? What's the panel? What's the result? So those are little things that if you look at it deeply, organizations must put in place to even shield themselves from litigation. Because there are times when the HR in the human resource managers in-house tells the organization what to do. And the business owner said, do you know who I am? So in situations like that, if the HR manager has said what should be done, the consultant outside has said what should be done, and the employer chooses to do it, the HR person should document. Because there's a little breach that there's a point at which the HR manager in-house would also need to prove. Because if the case gets to industrial court, you would have to stand as an evidence. What do you have to say
exactly
on the issue?
What happened?
So it's always good when there's a lot of documentation. Is it termination? Document it.
Yes.
Is it dismissal? Document it.
Yes.
And let the employee know which is which.
Yes.
Because if the employee, because there are some times when the employee just wants to be mischievous, to just drag the reputation of the company just like that without cause.
Okay.
It is the level of documentation that would save both parties.
Yes. So documentation should be done by the employee and then by the employer
To know whether it's a termination
or a dismissal. And I think this also falls back on, ensuring the policies of the organization, the guidelines of the organization. Because if it's a dismissal, the organization should state that when a dismissal is to occur, these are the reasons why, and this should be done.
Exactly.
And if it's also a termination, this is what should be done, and this is the notice to be given.
Yes.
So, but ordinarily, notice is supposed to be given when it comes to a termination of contract.
Yes.
So in short, just like we said last time, that you read through the policy and the guidelines of the organization. You don't want to make any mistake and realize that in your guideline, it was stated that if you do this, this is what will happen. And if you've been laid off, unjustly or dismissed without any proof or any evidence, or being probed or being questioned, you can, mitigate, sue the organization or bring an action against the organization and get compensation for that if you have the time. What exactly are the, work hours that are, expected that an employer should put out there? How long should an employee work? And is there ever any compensation as regards overtime? Or does working overtime even happen in Nigeria? Is there anything like working overtime in Nigeria?
Okay, so in terms of the work hours, the labor law is very open as to that. The only thing the labor law gives provisions for is the aspect of 1 hour break.
Yes.
For 6 hours work, which means that's why you notice that most employers they fix their working hours between, say, 8. So that's why they average on a daily basis about 8 hours.
Okay.
So with 1 hour break, that means between 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. So because it's free will, the employer fixes that timing because there is no evidence to show what the time should be. Okay. Then in terms of the numbers of hours, there is the ILO convention, the closest we've seen is minimum of 40 hours.
A week.
How that 40 hours is distributed is left to the terms of the employment contract and the employee handbook. Whereas whichever way the employer does must be fair.
Yes.
Now, if you do outside of that hours that have been stipulated per day or per week, then you'll be entitled to overtime. But most of the time, the categories of employees entitled to overtime differs from one organization to another because there is really no statutory regulation as to how that is defined. So most organizations usually leave the overtime for the non-clerical guys, for most of the blue-collar guys, talking about your drivers, your cleaners, and those, because it's easy to measure. Now, if there's going to be then also for factory workers, manufacturing outfits, they also define overtime, and they define categories of employees that can get overtime. Those categorizations are there. Most of the time, professional staff or senior level staff or managerial staff don't necessarily get overtime in some organizations, and simply because they feel that the exigency of work will require you to do more hours. But because your driver is waiting for you, you can afford to take care of yourself. For to keep the guy there, then let's give the driver. For us to do production, you have the numbers of hours and shifts you must do. If you do above that, then we'll pay you overtime. They also incorporate working weekends and working public holidays for some organizations. But all of that will have been policy driven from the HR policy and from the employee handbook. They will have stated who is entitled to overtime or not. So the question, direct answer is yes. There are employees that are entitled to overtime, but the categorization differs. What is being paid, there are no regulation as to what is being paid. So each organization determines what is being paid for overtime.
But this would not affect people that work in an organization and they can't leave their workplace until their boss leaves the workplace, or they can't leave the workplace because everybody's here and they're working and they'll be looking at you, so you don't want to leave. This might not necessarily apply to them.
Yes and no. So
Okay.
I'll use this by virtue of scenarios.
Okay.
So I've been in a situation whereby I work in consulting, and during the time I was an employee, I've had cause to the working directly with my manager that a certain year I actually went to work on December 25th.
Wow.
Either 25th or 26th, one of those days, just to be able to get a report out for the next day.
That you couldn't do online at home? Or it's just you just have to be there?
Those were days when the internet has not become obvious like now.
Okay.
Those were days when there are no personal computers per se.
Yes.
I was using a desktop in the office.
Okay.
My boss was a little bit conservative that you cannot send him an email report for him to look through. You must print out every single report.
Wow.
And he would correct every single report in the hard copy and return back to you, and you must correct it and send it back to him before you can send to the client.
Okay.
So I've been in that situation before, and I've moved on to the point at which I can now walk away, even when the job is not done.
Yes.
So it depends on the categorization of the employees.
Yes.
So at the level of your employee, there are different categorization in what we call job grading. So some employees are junior staff, senior staff.
Yes.
They may not be able to enforce their right when their boss are there.
Okay.
But there are organizations and employees that are managerial levels, senior managerial levels, executive levels, that sorry, I can walk away.
Yeah.
And it depends on the type of organization.
Okay.
So I've worked for multinational organization on a fixed term contract before, and I was working directly with the people director, and the people director was still in the office, and I was done by 5 p.m. and I was going.
Yes.
She cannot stop me from going.
Yes.
Because I'm done for the day.
Yes.
But because she likes working late, she was still in the office.
Okay.
A certain day, she jokingly said, you're going and I'm still here. And I said, sorry, madam, our contracts are different. And she would not intimidate me for that.
Yes.
But there are some organizations that the culture is toxic. You dare not say anything.
Yes.
It still boils down to the aspect of choice.
Yes.
Remember, the employment, it has a will.
Yes.
So as an employee, can you cope in situations like that? Because you still want to maintain healthy relationship.
Yes.
So I will say this last example jokingly, and I think I'll be able to do justice to this.
Yes.
So this happened in a financial institution.
Okay.
This person works at a senior management level. So he just notices that he stays on the mainland and his office was in the island.
Yeah.
And every single day, he doesn't get to see his kids.
Wow.
Every single day. He's out of the house. If he doesn't get out of the house before 5, he's late. So usually he's in the office 5:30 before 6.
Yeah.
He
Typical.
packs, he goes to sleep, and he gets work. And he's not out of that office 10, 11 sometimes.
Wow.
Because the MD just calls for meetings. It's because at the senior level. So this particular day, was sharing this with a couple of myself and a few people.
Okay.
And he said, one particular day at 5 p.m., he just picked up his bag and was heading out of the head office. And his boss asked him, are you fine? He said, yes, I'm fine. Where are you off to? I'm going home. And he left.
Wow. Nobody stopped him.
He didn't stop himself, so nobody stopped him. Because his contract says the time he's supposed to leave. So after he left, he told himself, it seems I'm mentally unstable for doing what I did. But he said he did not regret doing it. Do you know what happened? His boss called him later that evening and said, I think we need to rework our work hours. I think because he knows this was a guy that would always be there till 11, till 12, and he will still resume before 5:36.
First to get the last to leave. Yes.
So that singular incident set a ball in motion in the mind of his line manager that something was wrong.
Yes.
There were no work-life balance here.
Yes.
Now, I must tell you for free that some organizations thrive in that bad culture. They thrive in the culture, and because we are cultural here in Nigeria,
Yes.
we believe because my boss is still working, then I need to still work.
Yes.
So the responsibility of you keeping your job determine whether you want to play along or you don't want to play along. But I want to say for free that a stage in your career, you would break that rule. Because then the other aspect is, how do you put it across? You must understand your line manager. You must understand the culture in that organization. Because it goes a long way. Now, at a stage in your career, you can actually afford to cope with it. But if you cannot cope with it as an employee anymore, please take a walk. If you cannot challenge it, then take a walk. But there will be a stage you will get in your career that you will be the one making the dictation. I can say it for free today. There are days when I can tell my staff to go and say, sorry, I don't need you. I don't need you. It's 5, you can go. I'll take a bit. I'm still going to walk a little bit. But it now speaks to the ethics of the line managers. Some individuals believe I didn't have it easy, so you should not have it easy. But it's the other way around. Because the productivity of the employee starts to drop. I'm not doing anything, I'm just passing time. So what exactly do you want? What message are you trying to pass as an employer? The message of the wicked employer? Because I'm still here, you must be here. Just makes sense. It doesn't speak to productivity. So the value system of each employer and each line manager goes a long way. It comes to play in matters like that. So that's
for the employee, even for the employee, it means that you might stay longer and still not get work done. You might not be all that productive.
There is the aspect of productivity that everybody has in a certain day. So it's now the responsibility of the line manager to say, how do we measure performance? Is it by staying the time? So this is what COVID-19 has come to tell us, that we don't necessarily need to be in the office physically to get results. Do you think organizations that are successfully ran through the last couple of months without employees resuming physically would return back to physical job? No.
You probably don't have to.
If the productivity of the organization and the result is not dropping, then they are not likely going to see you physically. Because these are things that, as HR individuals, we've been talking about the future of work, the future of work. Now, COVID has taught us that you don't necessarily need to be there. So it means the performance of the employee should be result-driven and not activity. Employers need to start thinking that it's not how many hours the guy spends. So if the guy gets the job done at 3 p.m., must he wait till 5 or beyond 5 because you are still on the seat?
It doesn't solve anything.
It doesn't add up.
But because you've worked in this kind of environment before, have you been able to change, your own narrative as an employer to say, okay?
That's exactly what I picked out of that environment. And what I picked out of that environment is how not to treat my employees. So the first scenario that I mentioned, where before my employer leaves, if my MD does not leave, I don't leave the premises, even if I'm not doing any work with him or not. I made sure as a policy that there are some things I can do without my employees being there. Secondly is, do I suddenly call them up for off time? So what I do sometimes, most of the time, is most of our human capacity development trainings happen weekends. So what I try to do, when I started, it looked like joke. And my employee was wondering, what's this guy trying to do? I tried to give a stipend for transport, aside their salary for that month, just to be able to encourage them for coming for those hours. So that's me deciding by policy and by ethics and by my own values to say I will do what I prefer somebody to do to me, not the other way around. Because it is when you have the employees' head in the game that you get the results you need. So most employers pay lip service to the fact that the employees are their most critical assets, and they do it the other way around.
You don't treat them that way. So it is important for the employer, to ensure that you treat your employee in the best way. And even as an employee, as much as you can get your work done within 5 hours, within 6 hours, within 8 hours, you don't want to waste all that time and say, oh, okay, I want to do eye service and wait till when it's late at night to get my work done. So everybody thinks, oh, I'm coming back from work at 10 p.m. I'm the one that works the most. You want to give your best at work. And if you feel there's any situation whereby you've worked overtime, you've worked for too long, or then you're done with your work by 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and you have to leave. Some people have to leave because of security reasons. You can state it to your employer or state it to your HR manager, and I'm sorry, this is the reason why I have to leave and I can't stay longer than this. And try and make a time or work a time that is best for you. Thank you very much for watching today's episode. I hope you were able to learn something. So this episode is broken into series. Watch out for the next series next week. Please like, share, subscribe, and also drop your questions in the comment section. If you'd like to follow Mr. Segun Akiode for any other explanations, or you want him to answer any questions, or you also like to learn more about HR and capacity development, you can follow him at Segun Akiode on YouTube. You can also check out in the description for all other links to follow Mr. Segun Akiode. Thank you. See you next week.